How to learn faster and better with NLP. I think learning faster and better is a topic on most parents' mind, and especially high school students' mind. We have, as in most countries, pretty much a messed up year when it comes to education. But we are here now. We are in it. We need to make the best of it. So as a homeschool mom, I can guarantee you I understand the frustration. I understand everything that parents probably are going through at the moment, or most of the things. I'm sure there are some unique things that most of us cannot comprehend. But as an NLP practitioner, I do have information that I can give out there to help folks, especially the matriculants, to help them to see what they can do to learn faster and more efficient. We don't have more time, but there are things that you can actually do that we teach people in the NLP world that you can do to learn faster and recall information more efficiently. Now, NLP has been very successful in applied in spelling strategies, where they would teach kids how to spell and then write better. And what I want to talk to you about today is not necessarily the spelling techniques that they've used in NLP, but the principle behind that. And why is it that worked so effectively, and what part of that can you apply to any other type of studies? The best teacher is not in the classroom. The best teacher is experience out there. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But in the spelling strategy, what they have found is that kids would actually, when they learn to spell, they would see the word on a piece of paper, and then they would teach the kids to phonetically spell the word, and then kids would be able to remember it more easily. The downside of that in the English language, it works in most languages, but the downside of that in English is that there can be two letters. If you put them together, they make two different sounds, depending on in which word you are using them. And that made it problematic, because then phonetics is pretty much out the door, right? And so what they did then was to actually go to the best spellers and see how do they actually remember their spelling. And what they've learned is that these kids or people would actually, once they see the word, they would visualize the word on a screen in front of them so that they can recall it. And just by saying the word to themselves and by visualizing the word in their mind and recall that memory that they have in their mind about the word, they could immediately determine that there might be something wrong. The word's not correctly spelled the way they thought it would be. And so they could recall the correct spelling of the word. So what they did is they started to teach the kids these visualization techniques to poor spellers as well, and it improved their spelling immediately. So why does that happen? We take in information from our world, from the day we are born up and until where you are now in life. All of your experiences are made up of everything you take in from the world and from people that has an influence on you. You take that information in through your 5 senses, what we would call in NLP your representational system. And that would be visually, what you see. Auditory is what you hear. Kinesthetic is what you feel, and movement as well. But then you also get taste and smell, less popular, but you might even recall an instance or a memory where if you do smell something specific, it takes you back to that memory. So that's also a way for you. And even if you taste something, that is also a way for you to recall a memory from the past and how you take in experiences. Now, I did a very detailed workshop on this, and the whole concept of what role does emotions play in that experience, and when you bring emotions into the experience, what happens with that memory, and why is a memory so so hard to forget or so easy to remember for that matter. In my mental performance workshop, that video is available on YouTube. But if you want to understand a little bit more about that, I want to encourage you go and listen to that video, because a lot of what I'm saying here today will also make a little bit more sense. But when you can start to bring in information through all of your senses or most of your senses and not just one, you can excel your learning and your memory and recalling information rapidly. Now, in the classroom, what we see today, and even for most of the kids in the past few months, what they've experienced online was mostly auditory. And it is okay if you are mainly an auditory learner. In other words, you learn best through hearing things. But nearly all our kids nowadays learn through the mantra of, right, we read, we memorize, and then we have to go and write a test. And they get so used to that they start to get comfortable with that. And they think that that is the only way and the best way to learn and memorize information, which is not the case. And from a practical standpoint also, most of us adults that have gone through life and gone through experiences will also know that it is great to learn something from a textbook, right? But if you don't go out and apply the information or experience, or you are in an environment where you can actually experience the information and the education and everything that you've learned, it's very hard to retain that information or that content. Now, what happens now, if you can use as much of your representational systems or as much of your senses to take in information, that will take you a long way, as opposed to going strictly through your auditory method of taking in information. In other words, listening to a teacher. Now, how can you apply this in your own studies? Point number one is you want to make sure you bring in as much of those senses into what it is, that this piece of work that you need to learn now. And now what happens is it actually becomes a whole experience, and you get emotion involved. It's not like you're going to cry over the piece of learning or the content that you're reading, right? But there's going to be an emotional experience involved. We call this embodiment as well. And because you're bringing in multiple senses as well, and you can literally act out this experience, you will be amazed at how much you will be able to remember. So let's take history, for example. I understand it's an easier example as most of the other subjects, but let's take history. So when you read your textbook or you listen to a teacher giving you the information, you will most likely sit there or read a bunch of dates and some events that happened, right? With those at those corresponding or on those corresponding dates. What you could do is you can take that information and literally create a movie for yourself, and with a specific soundtrack. So here's the thing. You want to visualize that whole movie taking place, but you also want to hear. What are you hearing? That there can be a specific soundtrack. There can be specific things that you hear based on the event that took place on that day or that is taking place. And the moment you start to bring in all of these senses, you create an experience, and you make that an experience, and you can test it. If you think back to maybe a lecture and a movie, maybe 5-10 years ago, it will be much easier for you to recall a movie if it was really good, and you might even recall specific scenes, and you're probably going to recall exactly how you felt when you watched that scene. That's the first thing. Secondly, go back and think at a lecture that you attended. I probably guarantee you it's going to be very hard to remember even what they spoke about during that lecture. So I want to encourage you, if you are a parent and you know about a matriculant, send this information onto them. It is available on YouTube, but let them and allow them, even your own child, allow them to take the time when they are studying to bring all of their senses in as much as they can. And that may be one thing that you as adult can help them with, is to find creative ways of how they can take all of this information in, and creative ways of making. That's why we say we make sense of information, because we need all of our senses to make sense of information and then be able to memorize that and be able to recall that information. One other example also is that that's why we normally would teach kids that if they come back from school the day, the first thing you want to do is to summarize that same day. You want to summarize the work that you did in class. And then what you want to do is you want to stick it up the wall, even your bedroom wall. And because you see that every day, by the time you get to a test, or by the time you get to an exam, or by the time you get to the date that you actually have to write this subject, you would have seen that so many times and visualized it. Even if you just come in and you see something, you wouldn't necessarily even have to look on what was written on the piece of paper. You will be able to immediately visualize what you've written on that paper. Will go a long way in terms of cutting down on your actual study time and memorizing the information. I do hope that was useful. I do plan, I'll see what people are thinking, but I do maybe toil with the idea of putting a support group together, especially for the matriculants. But you can go to my website at explosiveminds.co.za and keep an eye on my website for more information about that. And yeah, I hope this was useful. Please send it on to anybody you think might benefit from this information. Bye.